Hello, and welcome to Dig It. I'm Peter Brown, and hosting the show with me today is Chris Day. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Peter.
In this edition of Dig It, we chat to Barry Smith, head gardener at Stowe Gardens near Buckingham. Landscape gardens, no less, and these are world-famous 18th century gardens which were created by names such as Charles Bridgeman, William Kent, and Capability Brown. Welcome, Barry, to Dig It. You've been at Stowe for over 30 years. Perhaps you could tell us how it all began for you.
Well, Chris, it's a bit longer than that. 43 years, coming on 44, actually.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's about 25 years as head gardener at Stowe. And that role's changed considerably in that time. With all the restoration at Stowe back to the 18th century style of gardening, it's the responsibility, more people involved, more staff, more volunteers. Responsibility and significance of the role has changed considerably, and I've had to keep up with so much of the knowledge to be plausible, I suppose, in my role.
Yeah.
Excellent. And now, Barry, I remember many years ago, I think you used to have the joy of mowing the lawns and sort of pruning the roses. The gardens have changed quite a bit in the times that sort of I've known you, haven't they?
Yeah, right back in the 1980s, I started with the headmaster's garden, and we used to grow annuals for there and prune the roses and mow with a cylinder mower. And 4,000 bedding plants in the greenhouse used to grow. But they were really good things to understand about plants, pruning them, propagating them. Those things are still all relevant. Diseases, everything like that, are all relevant in the wider landscape. So those basic garden skills that you learn doing that, it was so important, really.
And I was going to say, Barry, I was doing a little bit of research. I mean, Lancelot Capability Brown, of course, well-known, fantastic gardener of the time. Obviously, a great influence on the gardens at that time. It was his formative years. So, what sort of did he bring to the gardens then in those 11 years at Stowe?
Before coming to Stowe, he was in the fens learning about waterways, and it supposedly he came in to sort out the waterways at Stowe. The fountains didn't work, and so he was here to do that as one of his roles. But one of the things that's going on at Stowe at that time is the Charles Bridgeman Garden, very formal Baroque garden, was being changed by William Kent. Okay. And you feel that, so he's working as a head gardener under William Kent at the time and learning about landscape gardening and natural gardening. And when Kent leaves, he then becomes a designer, and that's when you get the Grecian Valley and even more thought to the park. So they're jumping the garden fence, making Ha-Ha, and they're going out into the park as well. So it's his formative years, and I think after Brown leaves for other places, they're keeping up with. There's some really good gardeners here, but they're keeping up with the fashions, and he's leading the fashion elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. So was he responsible for the Oxford Water then? Because that's a man-made lake, isn't it?
He wasn't. No, he lived in the West Boycott. That was where he lived.
So is that's one of the pepper pots as you sort of go up the main drive, is it? That's
right. That's where he lived, and he had 4 children and married here. But he never did the landscape there. No.
Okay. Because as you sort of alluded to him in liking water, I wondered if the Oxford Water was his creation, because it's a man-made lake from memory. It's sort of got a dam at the end of it, hasn't it?
Yeah, so the Oxford Water is probably the finest bit of parkland at Stowe, and that's attributed to Richard Woodward, who was a gardener after Brown. What you see at Stowe is every owner. So when it passes to a new generation, they bring in their own head gardener, and they want to build a new garden, and they want to we're not restore, but change the older garden to the new fashion. So you see that happening, and Richard Woodward did a fantastic job on the new, what we call the new park and Oxford landscape, and I'm hoping in a year or so to be able to do some more restoration of that work, because so much of Stowe you think is natural, but when you get deep into this, you really feel how much has been manufactured by these great people to make it a perfect nature.
I'd agree, Barry. One thing I always find amazing, that when the likes of Charles Bridgeman and William Kent were putting the gardens together, they were putting in young saplings, young trees, which of course they never saw the vision of them being mature. I mean, that in itself is most of these gardeners were visionaries, I suppose, weren't they?
They were visionaries, but Brown was, in particular, was renowned for moving trees, and he'd learned how to sort of do that. They would create a fibrous root on the tree by cutting through the roots of the tree and then regrowing it to create a fibrous root so it would more easily move. And those trees that were planted by Bridgeman in straight lines, you can almost see on the plans how they were changing the path and using those trees to create a more informal landscape. And so it's quite interesting how they were doing all that at that time. It's funny, when we had the tercentenary of Capability Brown, in National Trust, we totally failed on moving larger trees.
Well, you need big machines these days to do it, don't you? You can't do it manually. There's no lifting and without some machine helping you to do it.
Health and safety as well, perhaps, too.
Yeah. Barry, how do you get... So obviously you're working in an area that's had lots of different landscape gardeners and designers working on it. How do you choose which bits to restore or go back to or recreate when you're working with such a huge selection?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because you can't go back to the Charles Bridgeman landscape. You have to really go back to the last significant design phase. And that's usually in the late 18th century to early 19th century, before the family starts to go bankrupt. So even the Legion Fields, which attributed to Kent and broke away from the Charles Bridgeman formality, it's been changed throughout the 18th and early 19th century, and we go back to that sort of stage. But it's really about looking at these areas and what is the most significant points about them, what makes them truly special, and that's how we base our conservation and restoration.
Excellent. So, just out of interest, are the grounds themselves Grade 1 listed? So you have to get planning permission to do anything, or is it just a case of the buildings are Grade 1 listed, but the actual sort of gardens you can do whatever you like with?
No, they're all listed, and every eye from English, Heritage England, everyone has a look in, the Gardens Trust, to make sure that we are sort of doing it the best we can.
Ah. So, because I remember outside the headmaster's study, the Gothic library, there was a lovely rose garden donkey's years ago, whereas the last time I visited, that's all been ripped out. Is that because that wasn't there in the 18th century, or are there other reasons behind the changes?
Well, some of the areas are still looked after by Stowe School, and that's one of them. They've just done a nice early 20th restoration, sympathetic to modern gardening in the headmaster's study garden by I've got a name now, Brendan Moggridge, who designed that in the early 20th century, and they've restored that garden back to there. So so that's quite interesting as well. And what you find on these gardens, you see, is when there's owners like the Dukes of Buckingham and the family here, it's their garden, so they change it to what they want. But when it goes to a conservation body like the National Trust, it's not so easy to do our own thing, really. It's looking after what they made as significant.
Yeah, so it's sort you're almost a curator of the area, I suppose, which is good, because obviously that maintains, I suppose, continuity, doesn't it? It keeps everything going there. Do you find that sort of planting new areas, if you've got new areas to plant, can that be a little bit sort of restrictive with your designs with, say, the National Trust, or can you basically sort of put the plans into motion and go through the various avenues and go through the right people to make it happen? Is it a fairly straightforward process?
It's reasonably straightforward. It's great fun because first of all, you have to sort of look back to see what was there. Mm-hmm. You don't have a blank sheet of paper either. You have to respect the trees that survived because they're fantastic part of the past, but also they're really important ecology. So that sometimes means you've got to choose plants that can live in shade, where you might just have an open grown plant in if you could just do what you would like. So there's so much more to work into the restoration rather than planning a new garden. Mm-hmm. And also now we want the garden to look the same in 150 years' time as it does today and did in the 18th century. But that might mean using a completely different palette, because we've got to realise that now some of our trees we cannot use anymore, and some of the shrubs we won't be able to use, and climate change is going to be a big variant on what we plant now. So more and more we're having to keep up to date with our knowledge of climate change and what plants are going to adapt or and work in, so this garden looks like a landscape garden in 150 years. So
yeah, I suppose you're trying to just build in sort of resilience into the landscape, isn't it? Really knowing, as you say, there's so much we are having to learn about the change of with global warming and the effects of climate change. So that's going to be a big learning curve, and I'm sure listeners to our podcast are all in the same position. After this very, very wet winter, they said it was the wettest 18 months on record in the UK. Could I ask Barry how that affected Stowe Gardens?
Oh, it's been dreadful for us through the winter. We haven't been able to do the work we we wanted to do, and because it just makes so much mess doing that work. So it's messed all our seasonal work up. We were in the unfortunate position that we're going through ash dieback at the moment, and some of these ash are in really inaccessible places, and it has to have specialist machines to get in there. But more than that, I'm just worried about the effects of. Well, it's both. In the summer we might have a massive drought. It's this continual changing, and we've got Scots pines dying at Stowe, and we got the Forestry Commission involved and everything, and they put it down to drought. But now we're going into a really wet time. I mean, it's just yes, it's really
it's challenging,
difficult.
isn't it? It's a challenge.
It's certainly different from our childhood, isn't it? But just thinking about that, Barry, I can remember donkeys years ago, all the sort of meadows were always mown and there were sheep sort of roaming in them. Now National Trust policy is not to mow. And so obviously nature's getting hopefully more of a chance to do its thing. Have you noticed any changes since you've given up the mowing up there to the wildlife and what's going on?
Yeah, the policy change is to garden for nature. Sometimes it's not possible to do, but it works with our garden really, really well. The garden's made up of they're man-made habitats, but they can be really significant habitats and grow some amazing plants. And so the shrubberies, we think about nectar sources, the arisings. We put back discrete dead hedges now and we sometimes grow honeysuckle and things like that over them to give nectar sources. Our wildflower meadows, we not only plant what we call indicator species, which are indicators of a really good sward. We plant other things like snakehead fritillaries and that, and they are part of our seasonal approach to gardening. So it really does fit in well with our approach and our approach to having a garden that is improved nature.
Brilliant. That's good to hear then.
And Barry, being the head gardener and gardening on such an amazing, massive scale, and for so many visitors that obviously you've got to deal with, what sort of problems cause you sort of headaches and problems? Are there issues which you each year you come across in a very busy time as far as tourists are concerned?
I think we want to engage with the public, and we want the public to love the place, because that's part of it being a wonderful place for the future, and make it their place and enjoy it for what they want to do in it.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you get desire lines and damaged edges to the path, particularly in the winter, winter's become a really good time to visit places like Stowe and get out of the house and come get some fresh air. But it does give me a few headaches, but I suppose they're good headaches really, because I'm getting that love of place and people engaging with the place, and that's what's going to ultimately look after it for the future. Yeah,
that must give you an awful lot of satisfaction, and of course all your volunteers at the over the landscape gardens too.
Yeah, I mean we couldn't really do it without our volunteers. We have got a reasonable amount of staff, like 5 gardeners and 4 rangers to look after the place, but we just would be lost without our volunteers, and they love the place so much and protect it so much. It's and obviously it enables people to get out of their house and come and help. I mean, I've seen people that have had bereavements and things like that make a new life and feel they can get out into a garden and talk with like-minded people, and it's really made it's been something special for them in their latter years.
Excellent. Yeah, that's good to hear. What sort of numbers do you get through the gate each year?
Well, we're not the biggest numbers of sites in the trust, but we're 240,000 visitors to the pay barrier as to the actual garden.
Wow.
There's a lot of room at Stowe, though, so there's room for more. And also, we don't count them to the park, and a lot of the park around the outside is, freely accessible by the public, and people like to come and run on some bits of Stowe that they don't even realise are the gardens, and we hope in the future that we'll be able to do more to encourage people to come to our park and come into our garden and support us, really, and enjoy engaging with the countryside and gardens.
Well, it's one of my favourite dog walks as a child was going around there, and I was very fortunate that I was able to go to the school, and I can remember the Temple of Concord when I was there was just a bricked up temple which you couldn't even get in, whereas now I think it's all been opened up and you've discovered a cellar, should we call it, underneath it, none of us even knew about. Is there any other sort of temples or new tunnels or exciting things like that you guys have found recently?
Well, there's a few that I haven't found, which gives me hope for the future. I just remember going into Concord and Victory when they opened up the undercross for the first time, and it went down this small hole. I don't think I could fit through it anymore, but I did at that time, and walked around, and it was a really cold day, but underneath was really warm, and you could see, because it had been built from the inside, you could see where the workers had put their candles, and it was really exciting.
Wow.
So that was an amazing experience, and going into these places it's just what people want. Whether they want to, if someone comes to a house, they want to look in a cupboard, don't they? To just or
I'm always guilty of that. Yeah, definitely.
But I mean, I think it's worth saying, with the handover from Stowe School, they saved the place in the 1923, and I think they did a great thing to the nation and given it to the National Trust in '89 and allowing us to restore it. And so they did an amazing thing in how they've worked with the National Trust.
Mm. Well, certainly now, I mean, places like the dining rooms, they're just a world apart from when I was there eating my lunch. It's just such beautiful. I mean, now it looks like a palace sort of inside, or what my imagination says a palace should look like, whereas when I was there, it was all painted white, and that was about it. The plaster work was there, but unfortunately not in the glorious ways you guys have got it to now.
Yeah, I mean, I was up there in 1980, and very different place, very run down, and so it wasn't just the gardens being given to the National Trust to restore. They have got Stowe Preservation Trust, Stowe Health Preservation Trust, that are looking after the house, and I've done an absolute amazing job. And that's the place I go up there for meetings sometimes, and I stand in the rooms looking out at the garden, because it's the most wonderful place to view the landscape. It's a wonderful place to. So you look from at height. All the buildings are on promontories, and one of those is the house. And so looking out over the garden from a promontory is really important, and it's a very special view.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Barry, I have to say, my overriding love of Stowe really is the approach from sort of from Western Avenue when you're driving down, and you've got those amazing tree-lined sort of vistas, and then you've got the Ha-Has behind, and I just think it's just grand. It's grand, it's palatial, and thinking that over 300 years, tourists have visited Stowe in some form or other. I'm thinking also, I'm a bit of a film geek, Barry, and I know a lot of cinematic blockbusters have been filmed there. Indiana Jones, The Last Crusade, which I think they used part of the scene there in the Berlin rally scene where Indy gets the Führer's autograph, and in the 2018 movie Slaughterhouse Rulez with Simon Pegg and Nick Frost, and of course the Royal Academy Observatory in Stardust, and of course the James Bond film was The World Is Not Enough was filmed there. I mean, those must be great times to have film crews at Stowe, or are they a bit of a headache?
Both really. We are a significant place for filming, and it's great to look at the films and say, that's so. And so that's really great, and it provides fantastic income that goes towards the conservation of the place, which is remarkable. And there is good fun when they're here, but they need a lot of space. There's a lot of lorries and vans that come with them, and they cater for people, and it's amazing operation, and so there's some headaches within it as well.
Excellent, that's good.
And back in 2012, the National Trust opened sort of the New Inn, which I can remember as a sort of derelict old farm building, or what looked like a farm building, but apparently, obviously, it was an old coaching inn. And the gardens have been absolutely transformed. What gardening elements have you introduced to the new visitor centre and the surroundings?
Well, before 2012, I started. I knew New Inn was coming along, and I started to turn the garden round to face a different way, because obviously in '89 the entrance was by Concord and Victory, and so not so many people got to the other end of the garden. So we've done lots and lots to transform that part of the garden, putting down new paths and things like that. But with the New Inn itself, I was involved in that project to do the car park and the approach and things like that. And I wanted it to feel like you were coming along a country road, and then you would enter a car park. You'd realise it was a car park at the last minute, and I wanted it to have as much nature involved in it. So we were able to do lots of hedges. It was just hedge laid and that. So that approach to thinking about nature was going on. It's gone all the world, not just recently. And New Inn emphasises that. So and also it was putting back that approach that Chris was on about Buckingham Avenue, and people don't realise how much land has been moved to get the levels right on that. As you approach the Corinthian Arch, They position the arch perfect height, and if you stand at the arch and they open the doors of the house, you can see George on his George I on his statue, equestrian statue.
On the other side, wow, on the north.
On the other side, yeah. So all the levels are there's so much groundwork that's gone into producing that perfect approach, and with New Inn, we had to the avenue was up to the arch there'd been lots of forestry plantations put along there in the 1940s, and we managed to save some of most of the veteran beeches that come up that last bit of avenue, and the limes and other trees, and we did have to shape a couple of them to set the arch up properly on the landscape again, and then we had to plant up new trees and that sort of. I remember at the time people saying to me, "Well, it's got to the stage where you should just cut them all down and start again." But I didn't take that approach. Those were historic relics and really important habitats, and we incorporated them. And I think I'm pretty sure I got it okay. I think it'd have been the wrong decision to go in that direction.
Not at all, no. And can you just, maybe you know the answer to this myth, or maybe not a myth. If you stand on the south front and look through the Corinthian Arch, is it true that it lines up with Marble Arch in London?
I think it's near enough, but I think it's more myth. I don't think it directly lines up. All these, the one that is difficult also is about Buckingham Church, because the original garden used Buckingham Church as a eye catcher, but recently we've realised that the old side of Buckingham Church, because it was rebuilt on its present location, doesn't actually line up to the centre. But they were, so whether they could see it on the distance, and it was just to the side, because the churches were really important to have on their vista.
Yep.
Because that axis is your path of life, exiting through the church to heaven, and now through the pearly gates, the Corinthian Arch.
Ah. Right. Yeah, because Stowe Church is just off to the left-hand side when you're looking down the south front, isn't it? So I guess that's interesting. Good stuff. And just thinking about the Grand Avenue, originally it was lined with elms, but obviously due to Dutch elm disease, they will have to be replaced. Do you think they're likely to be put back to elms in the future to restore the Grand Avenue to its former glory, or will you just leave it with the trees that are growing there at the moment?
Yeah, avenues are really difficult these days. At their best, they are single species, but it's really difficult to know what single species to use without coming unstuck. So we do tend to plant more mixed avenues. The avenue that's there in Buckingham now was planted by Stowe School actually before I arrived, and it is a mixed avenue. Yeah. I think I see it in old pictures of the elms going down that drive, and it just looks amazing. And in reality, it's very difficult now to know what to use. I mean, even the replacement elms, the cultivars that are disease resistant, they give the same back to nature. So there's various butterflies and that use the nectar from the elms, and they're very scarce now. and they are really useful in the garden.
Yeah.
And they give it warmth and colour and things like that, but they're not the same as the English elm. So they're slightly different, but they do offer a lot.
And thinking, Barry, about the plants, obviously you've got to source plants which are, I suppose, historically accurate to what you're replacing, and of course now we're thinking sort of peat-free too. What sort of considerations do you have to make as a head gardener on that sort of process?
Yeah, we need to work towards eliminating peat. It's devastating when you see peat bogs being stripped, and that's what that means to climate change as well. The amount of carbon that can be stored in peat bogs and things like that, and climate change is massive in our work now, and sustainability as well. And so with so many diseases as well, we try to grow our own, or they come from really secure sources where biosecurity is excellent, trying to stop diseases coming into the site. Yeah.
Going to be very important. And obviously, for Barry, you've worked a long time as a head gardener. What advice would you give to somebody who's contemplating going into that side of horticulture?
Well, we just had an apprentice up at Stowe, and I like to think that set her on a new path in horticulture. I wish I could do more to encourage and give the opportunity to people from the locality that love the countryside, love working in it and growing plants, and because it changed my life. I was always outdoor person. I didn't like school. I was more interested in the early 80s of playing basketball at a high level, and it gave me an opportunity to engage with my passion and make it a career, and that's something really special. And I think we should all be trying to give the opportunities for the next generation to get involved. And it started at Stowe for me when I was about 5 or 6, running up the avenue, jumping on the freshly cut stumps of the elms that had been cut down at that time, chasing my brother to the next stump. And that's my earliest memory of this graph.
Wow. That's a good memory to have, isn't it? I think, I can remember as a child always loving climbing trees, and things like tree stumps were always great, weren't they? You could always sort of scratch them with stones, and you didn't get told off for damaging things. But,
Different times.
That's it. And I guess, has that love of nature and gardening sort of led you to go and visit other large estate gardens or smaller estate gardens? Are there any sort of particular favourites that you can mention to us that you like to go and visit?
Oh, I now love the gardens on a big scale. I suppose Stourhead would be a one I would suggest.
Yep.
But then again, I do like Stackpole. It's in Pembrokeshire, and I've visited that several times now. Mm-hmm. Now, very interesting from a point of view is that they allowing the 18th century garden to see a face in the landscape down there, and sea is taking over again, and to see that the approach to nature down there very, very different to what I'm doing at Stowe. So I love that place and that whole environment by the sea and the dunes with nature just flooding everywhere. Yeah.
Excellent. And do you, as like head gardener of Stowe, get to liaise with other head gardeners in the National Trust or in other big gardens to share ideas and new methods of what you're up to?
Yes, we do. And also, to say something about the Garden Trust. They've set up a gardeners network for Buckinghamshire gardeners, head gardeners and gardeners, and that networking is so important to see where other people are struggling with disease or climate change or any of the other problems going on in looking after our gardens now. Knowledge and most up-to-date knowledge of success stories is really important. You need to know so much, and so networking is really important. And gardens can be quite isolating if you don't have that networking. You want mentors, to be able to just sound off to sometimes, and so building up that network is really important.
Brilliant.
That's very good. And thinking, Barry, about being obviously the head gardener at Stowe, what aspects of your career have you been particularly proud of?
Well, it's been really exciting all the way through. Every project that I've done restoring this garden up at Stowe has been fantastic and exciting, and that particularly when I was given the opportunity to restore the golf course, known as golf course at Stowe, back to park and garden. Mm-hmm. The golfers have got a new golf course, and that I think has been the most exciting. It was during lockdown, through the COVID crisis, that I was able to carry out that work, and it was just great. It kept me going through a very difficult time, and the result was absolutely fantastic. I was able to look into working with the archaeologists on the old garden that was there to reshape what we restored it back to. It's really, really exciting. I think, though, ultimately, it's been the people that I've worked with that's been fantastic as well. I've worked with some amazing people. I've had so much fun along the way, and all those sort of things. So, and now that's been tremendous.
Good stuff. And yeah, I mean, certainly thinking about the golf course, it was a nice little 9-hole golf course, but now you've chopped all the sort of old shrubbery and woods out and opened the vistas up. I mean, the buildings like the Ice House are just a step back in time, aren't they? I mean, obviously, we've in our lifetime never had to store ice, but that building's great. It's just so many interesting things up there, and like you say, sort of to work in it must have been an amazing experience.
Amazing experience, and when you think you know most things, you learn something more, or you find something like ice house or some foundations, and particularly around Queen Caroline, for instance. There was a previous building called the Gibbs building. Okay. And there was 8 bases, and we found those bases for the 8 rise-back statues of the British Worthies. And so they were moved from there to where they are now situated with 8 by Schumacher, so at the British Worthies now. So they were moving all these buildings around. Like I often say, it's like your own garden. You don't like the it over there. I'll just move it there. And they were doing the same thing that you might do it with plants, but they were doing it with buildings.
Wow, slightly grander scale then, Barry, just a bit.
Yeah.
And thinking about what changes, Barry, do you think will happen in the future? To keep these amazing landscapes, gardens looking so good. Have you got any sort of plans or any sort of visions you'd love to fulfil?
Yes, there's lots still to do. Lamport Garden always excites me. That was a part of the garden. Every generation changed the garden. Even when they're going bankrupt in the middle of the 19th century, they're still trying to build a new garden. And Lamport Garden was that, and that was almost a picturesque in style.
Okay.
A very fashion's changing, and they're trying to keep up with the fashion. So there's exciting parts still to do, but also it's about securing it for the future, conserving it for the future, pushing back the right plants that will be able to exist in a different climate, changing climate, and also grassland and giving back to nature. There's still so much we can do in the garden that will give back to nature, but be really part of our seasonality of place. Snowdrops, for instance. Snowdrops are amazing in a landscape garden. Early nectar source, so giving back to nature, and visitors will love it, and it just really fits in with our type of gardening.
And the thing I always find so inspiring about places like Stowe is when you guys do snowdrops, you do them on an area the size of my whole garden. You don't do just like half a dozen and start, and hopefully in a couple of years they might be a square metre of snowdrops. The sizes and
the numbers,
it's inspiring without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to do things at landscape scale for them to feel right in the landscape. I think that's almost the thing to do. You when you're gardening your own little garden, you're making it trying to fit in with that smaller garden. So, but we're always thinking about the scale of the garden and what impact you will make, and I think that's a really important point. I always look at the monuments. They're massive part of the garden. They're the focal point that catches your eyes, but they you have to plant round them to give them a backdrop, make them comfortable in their landscape, and so you have to plant on a landscape scale to make that happen.
Definitely. Our next question we'd like to ask all our guests, Barry. You've been shipwrecked on a desert island. Which plant or tool would you wish for to enjoy life on your desert island? I guess you've used a few tools and machines that most of us would possibly had in our toy box as children, but never had the real toys and diggers and things like that you've been playing with.
You know that you're correct. It's a really good question, isn't it? Because I can drive a JCB really competently and make a real difference with a JCB excavator. And other excavators are obviously available. But I would always, I think, I will always go for my secateurs, my Falco secateurs, because I can remember along that, it's so significant to a garden, and you can make such a difference with secateurs. You always need them in your pocket. I remember when I was starting out that I lost the head gardener's secateurs, I think they went into a trailer of leaves, and I can remember his face now. The most significant tool I'd want to take is my secateurs, and the plant is a tulip tree. The tulip tree, from North America, used in our gardens, 18th century gardens. And I was just out the other day, and it's now coming into leaf, and it's just so intriguing. The leaf structure and amazing tulip-shaped flower in the summer, and fantastic autumn colour. I'd love to have that with me.
Fair enough.
On the Dutch island.
Sounds a brilliant partnership. Your secateurs, you've got all trusty falcos, and your tulip tree. Barry, and finally, we usually like to ask our guests for an amusing plant or gardens-related tale. Do you have anything you can discuss with us?
Yes, because I've always had so much fun at Stowe in all my work. But let's just go back to April in lockdown in 2020, and we were all sort of spread out, all the team at Stowe, everywhere, and at that time, on April the 1st, it just so happened we were taking over the golf course for the first time to restore it to Home Park, and so really exciting time, and so I did a little video. I went out on the golf course, hadn't had any maintenance for quite a few months, and I went out onto the golf course. And before I got there, I'd gone down to our greenhouses, and I'd got the snake's head Fritillary in a pot that we were going to put out in the grassland. And I went onto one of the greens, and I put it in the hole that was left there.
Right.
And so I walked onto the green with recording, saying about the golf course, and I hadn't had much maintenance done for a few weeks, and I wonder how nature is taking over. And I put the camera down on the green, and you could see this snake's head Fritillary growing out of the hole of the golf course, and it was brought a lot of humour to a very serious time when I sent that round to everyone, and so it was a bit of fun there, and
excellent.
I've always loved to have fun like that in my work.
That's good.
Fantastic. That's a great story. Thank you.
So Fritillary. Do you know what number of the greens it was? Was it a hole in one, or was it a hole in 8 or 9?
I think it was the ninth. Ninth green. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Can I ask, Barry? You mentioned about volunteers. I mean, I'm sure a lot of our listeners on Digit might be interested in getting involved in sort of National Trust properties up and down the country. Is there a process of showing your interest as a volunteer? Is it easy to get your name on board?
Yeah, it's a real opportunity for people to get involved in gardening and countryside work and looking after these places and visitors at all these National Trust properties. They're usually the best place to start is go to the properties website, and that will give you an opportunity to see what's available for volunteering. So that's the best way. But obviously, it's always possible to just phone up and ask what opportunities there are. Excellent. And it's really rewarding to give something back to help the National Trust. I've been with them for many years now, and it's really good to see what the work they do, and a real opportunity for people to get involved.
Absolutely, yeah, that's great.
Brilliant. Well, Barry, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great chatting to you, and thank you so much for all the hard work you and your team have put into such a fabulous garden. I mean, every time I come up there, something's changed, and a new view has been opened up, or some new plants have been put in, and it's always so inspiring to come and visit places like the one that you work and maintain and help sort of push forward. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Barry, and we're so fortunate it's just down the road from us. So yes, thanks again, Barry, for your time today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to share the passion of myself, my team, and volunteers that have made. I think the team actually has made such a difference at Stowe. It's about the people, and pleasure to share it with you.
Great stuff.
Thanks, Barry.
Thanks then, Barry. See you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Today's show was brought to you by Buckingham Garden Centre and Nurseries. The show was hosted by Chris Day and Peter Brown. The show was produced by Peter Brown. And our thanks to Chiltern Music Therapy for providing the music. Thanks for listening.
At Chiltern Music Therapy, we want everyone to know the difference that music can make in their lives. From parents and their premature babies in hospital to grandparents with dementia. We provide music therapy and community music services to people of all ages and needs across England. We work both digitally and in person in people's homes, care homes, schools, hospitals and hospices. Find out more at chilternmusictherapy.co.uk.